Hey friends, it's Misa with Laser Designs by Misa. We recently made this backlit logo sign with an LED strip, and it turned out so awesome that we just had to share the step-by-step process with you. So join us here from creation to mounting so you can make your own. We're going to be covering so many great skills in this video, including preparing a logo in Adobe Illustrator, assigning and cutting in the Lightburn software, focusing and framing on your laser, using unicorn spit to finish it and seal it, gluing acrylic to wood, installing an LED light strip, and working with standoff hardware. We'll even touch at the end on how to price your sign for sale. Here you can find a comprehensive list of all of the materials and software programs we used in making this sign. We hope that this helps you be prepared to make your own. Okay friends, the first thing that we're going to do is get started in Adobe Illustrator. As you can see here, I already have my logo in vector format. So this is not a raster image, it is completely all vector shapes. So as I get oriented here, I really want to make sure that my artboard is the size of the piece of material I'm going to be putting in my laser. So I have it set to 24 to 34 inches. Now I'll need to enlarge my logo to start filling up the space on the artboard. I'm planning on making a pretty large sign, so I want to make sure that I am filling the space as much as possible. The next thing I need to do is make the structure shape of the sign. So I want a shape that is going to mimic this kind of oval lozenge shape that my logo already is in. So I'm going to use the shape tool to pull out a rectangle, and then popping over to the transform panel to clean up the sizing. I forgot to use the aspect ratio unlock here, and so now I'll go ahead and get some nice clean sizing by unlocking that. So I'm going to go ahead and select my shape now, and one of my favorite things in Adobe Illustrator are these dynamic corners. So as you can see, I have my shape selected and all four of these little corners, and I can pull them in to round them. And now I'm just going to play around to see which dimensions I like best for this sign. So now that I have a shape that I like and some good dimensions at 22 by 29, we need to do a little editing, because as it sits right now, the logo is kind of sitting on top of the shape, but I want the logo to be negative space, and we kind of have to turn it into a stencil. So the letters, as you can see, the little A and the D, all of these letters that have the little cutouts, when we cut it, they're gonna fall out. So we have to basically turn these letters into a stencil. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a stroke and remove the fill here. And so all of that would cut, like I said, as it stands, but we wanna make sure this little opening in the A doesn't fall out. And so we're going to use the pen tool to create a shape and basically anchor in this little A space here. So I'm going to go ahead and add an anchor point here, and then come on over, basically making a rectangle. There we go. So now I'm going to be using this little shape to basically punch out a space in the A so that it is all one piece. After I've ungrouped the letters, I will select both my A and the little rectangle and do minus front in the Pathfinder window. Next, the keyboard shortcut minus is also the remove anchor point tool, and I'm going to just go ahead and click out some of these extra anchor points to get a nice smooth line. So you can see this technique makes the A more like a stencil font, and I can now cut that shape out without losing that little triangle inside the letter. I'm going to go over and do all of the other letters in the same fashion. I'll try to use this little rectangle shape as much as possible just to keep it easy. I'm going to rotate, line it up with the back side of the B, and do the same process. I'm not quite sure what will look the best, so I'm going to try a couple of different ways. I'm going to go ahead and line up these stroke lines and go ahead and select both objects after I make a little copy because I don't want to have to be creating this rectangle a million times over again. After I do minus front in the Pathfinder window, I'll use the subtract anchor point tool to clean up this line. As I mentioned before, you can also use the keyboard shortcut of the minus to pull up that feature. And I'm going to go ahead and try, I'm not really sure what shape I'm going to want this B in its final form, but I'm going to go ahead and try to punch out this second shape through the middle here and decide if I like it. I think I'm going to go ahead and undo and try the punch out here at the top. And again, I've remembered to make a copy of my shape so that I can just keep using it. Minus front, and then I've decided that this is, I think, how I would like the B to be in its final form. So I'm going ahead and cleaning up these extra anchor points before moving on to the next letter. So I think that B looks pretty good. I like that the best. And I'm going to go ahead and move my little guy down here, looking for another letter that needs done. Okay, so this A, I thought about fast forwarding through some of this, but I decided that it might be best to just keep practicing this skill if this is something you're really interested in. So I've shrunk down my shape a little bit because this A is a little smaller, and I'm going to hopefully select it and rotate it into a nice position to match up this line on the A. So once I feel like I have it good enough, I'm selecting both the shape and the A, remembering to make a copy, and doing Pathfinder minus front. Now I still have these little jagged lines here, so I'm hitting the keyboard shortcut minus to pull up the remove anchor point tool so that I can clean up that line. We will move on next here to the R, making a copy, and again I will rotate my rectangle into position. Once it's in position, there we go. And again, once it's in a position that I like, almost there, I will select both the R and the rectangle and do minus front to punch out that line, and pop on over to the remove selection tool or minus on your keyboard to clean up those extra anchor points there. All right, friends, moving on to this D shape. I've pulled out a copy, which you can do by just clicking and dragging while holding Option, or you can just do your keyboard shortcuts for cut copy. So I've lined up the D and done minus front in the Pathfinder window. I'm also going to try center aligning these little anchor points. So I selected them with the direct selection tool and used the align functions to stack them right on top of each other. And again, hitting minus and using the remove anchor point tool to clean up that straight line. Didn't quite like how I aligned that little anchor point there, so I selected just it alone with the direct selection tool and nudged it over with my keyboard arrow. Okay, looking around, and I think that those are all the letters. All right, now that we have the sign laid out the way that we like it, I'm going to address some of these free floating shapes like the stars and dots and even these little separations in the ring. So what I have decided to do is ungroup so that these guys are isolated. What I have decided to do is I'm going to put a acrylic piece, glue it to the back behind just the manta and the rings, and then I'm just going to glue on stars and circles after. And I think just to be easy, I'm just gonna take the negatives, like when this all cuts, these shapes will just be cut out, and I'll just take this little star and glue it on right here. So the first thing I need to do is just get rid of these guys because we don't need to cut them if we're not going to use them. So I've selected all of them and delete. The next thing we're gonna do is also get rid of these guys. I think that I'm not even gonna glue them into the ring. I'm just going to delete them entirely. So select, delete. And now what we need to do is figure out the shape of the acrylic piece that we're going to be gluing behind this manta ray. We need enough of an edge that we can glue it to the back of the wood without glue oozing into this negative space here. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab my pen tool, or pencil tool, excuse me, and I'm gonna check on how smooth. It's pretty smooth, but I don't want it to be too crazy. So I'm gonna bump down the smoothing effect, and this will just make it more true to the shape I'm trying to draw. If it's really uber smooth, it will default more towards the lines being very, again, smooth versus accurate. So I want it mostly smooth, but I also kind of want a little bit of accuracy. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. So I'm just gonna take this pen tool and give myself enough of an edge and draw a shape freehand around this manta ray. Here we go. Holding down Shift. And making this kind of blob shape that I'm going to glue around my manta. Okay, and you can see going into the direct selection tool here, the shape is made up of a bunch of little anchor points. So I can go ahead, if I wanted a space thicker, I could, again, using the direct selection tool, I could move the anchors, and these are called handles, and they help with the curves of the path. And this is a path, so our laser will just cut the acrylic exactly like this blob shape. I don't think it has to be too accurate. So just to get a visual here, I'm going to bring up my sign to the front, arrange, bring to front. So this is going to be the acrylic shape. So let's add a fill like that. That kind of looks like acrylic. And then I'm going to be painting my sign dark. So let's do this dark sign. So you can see, again, the acrylic will go behind the body of the sign, and it will glue in this little space around the edge. And so the acrylic will just show through my manta and not the letters or the stars. And it's going to be kind of a transparent mirrored acrylic, so it'll be super fun because the light will come in through it at a different color. It's going to change the color from what goes through the manta and what goes through the letters. All right, so let's go ahead and move this shape to an artboard over here. Select them both. Let's go ahead and remove the fill. The stroke is what I like to set for cutting, is just red. And we'll get these over to Lightburn and cut the sign out of plywood and this blob shape out of acrylic. Now here I am in Lightburn, and I actually did a Command C to copy my sign and then a Command V to paste it just straight into Lightburn. But I could have saved those files and then just opened them up in the Lightburn software. So as you can see, I've got my cutting surface, that gray rectangle, and I'm going to just rotate my sign so that it's ready to go in the cutting area. I have my settings set to line, which will make it cut, and I'm doing 22 speed at 90 power. You can't see it here, but my minimum power is set to 75. Now I'm ready to turn on my Mira 9. As you can see, I've got some plywood loaded and I'm gonna turn this baby on. So give the key a flip, and I'm using a 8-gallon air compressor just for cleaner cuts, get more air movement through my machine. So I'm gonna turn that on as well. I've made sure to pin my material nice and flat, and we're gonna get ready to focus and cut. So I'm gonna go into my ZU settings and scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says autofocus. This is a great feature in the Mira 9 because I just put the material in and set it up and allow that little autofocus pin to go in, find the material, and do its measurements. Now I'm gonna go grab my file, see if I can find it in there, and that is great. So I've already got this sent over to my machine, and I'm going to go ahead and plot out exactly where it's gonna cut. So I've done origin and frame. And as you can see, the laser head tracks the space on the wood where the entire file is going to get ready to go. So we're ready to hit start, and there we have it. We are cutting our sign. All right, we are all done here, and we're ready to pull this job out of the laser. I'm gonna go ahead and use my control panel here to lower my bed so I do not accidentally hit the laser head with the material, and I can pull it out super easily. I sped this up a little bit just so we can move through, but as you can see, it cuts super great, only a couple little sticking points, and I've got this fun negative image, and my sign is ready to go. All right, back over to the laser. I have the acrylic blob shape file up, and I've selected it, and I'm going to frame it out, origin, frame, on my acrylic piece. I, of course, did my autofocus on this piece as well in the same fashion as the plywood. So I have my acrylic going here, and let's get that cut. I picked out a super fun iridescent clear acrylic, transparent acrylic for this part because I think it's going to be super fun for the LED lights to shine through. There's lots of super great tips for cutting acrylic. Many people like to raise the acrylic up off the bed to prevent flashback. Some of us use Dawn dish soap across the acrylic with the masking taken off because it's a flame retardant and you can get by without having to have any sort of masking material. Because this was a quick cut, I left the plastic masking on it and watched it really closely. All right, friends, our cutting is finally done. It's time to paint. Hey friends, we're back again, and it's time to add some color. So I have my ginormous sign that I cut out of this is maple plywood, and I'm gonna backlight it with some LED lights, and so I thought I would just increase the silhouetting by making this a rather kind of dark, watery, blue, purple, green, black mix. So I'm hoping for that effect, and I'm going to be using 600 grit sandpaper. Again, some maple plywood. This is a 1/4 inch. And I'm also going to be using one of my favorite pigments, and that is the unicorn spit. This is going to be a combination of the regular unicorn spit. You can find this mostly in commercial stores. And also the creator of Unicorn Spit has her own line that she's still hand making that is going to be the Artistic Vivations. And this is my preferred metallic concentrate, is the Artistic Vivations. It is way more true to the original like unicorn spit texture and application, and it's a little less plasticky because it doesn't have any plastic in it at all. So again, these all just need sealed with some sort of oil-based sealant, and for that I'm going to be using this hemp salve, also from Artistic Vivations. I can't even tell you how good this smells, so I love using it, and then when it's all over my hands, I just rub it in like lotion, honestly. So I love this stuff, and it's gonna work great sealing all my spit. So I have a little dish. I'm gonna kind of just make a mess, I think. So I have a little dish. I'm gonna pour a bunch of spit in it, and I'm not really gonna care how much it oozes together, because that's the point. And all the colors that I'm using will blend really nicely together. I do have a green, so I think I'm going to keep that separate from the blues and the purples, because that is going to mix a little bit differently, so I'm going to be a little bit more strategic with that. So first things first is I'm about to use a water-based coloring, stain, whatever, and that will have the tendency of pulling up these wood fibers. So to just protect my wood as much as possible and increase my likelihood of getting a really nice satiny finish, I'm going to go ahead and sand this whole surface down with some 600 grit sandpaper. So let's do that first. You could definitely use a palm sander. I don't have this grit set up that way. Little stars. Now before I seal this, after I apply all my color, I'm going to, again, very lightly sand it, because when I apply the water, it is just going to naturally try and lift some of these wood fibers. So I will sand them back down again before I add the oil finish. But this is a good start. So I have my little dish, and I also have a cup of water. And so the more that the unicorn spit is combined with water, of course it's going to dilute the concentration of the pigment, and it's going to be lighter. And the least amount of water, the more concentrated it's going to be. So I'm going to layer some colors, and I'm going to have some varying concentrations. So I have, because I really want that oozy water look, and I hope that I do a good job at achieving that. So let's see, I'm really good at shaking these when they're open. So it's a good thing that this is washable, because my white counters have been covered in it many a time. Another thing I like about this, until you seal it, it is 100% rehydratable. So I did another thing the day before yesterday, and I mixed some colors in this cup. It washes completely clean because it's not sealed, but it's dry. So all I know is that I can add some water to this, which I probably will do because it's the green that I want to use. Add some water to this and let it sit for a little bit, and it will be as good as new. So as expensive things are, you don't want to waste them. So we just did the Dionysus. This is Hades. I think there'll be some more blends and colors coming soon. So when we're using a black, a little bit goes a really long way. All right, so then we also have my favorite, regular, and this is the Blue Thunder. You are going to try one color. Let it be this one. It is great on wood products and is really complementary to wood tones. Okay, this is Taurus. Okay. So I'm still have some unicorn spit on my hands. It looks like it'll stay forever, but generally by the next day. This is a really nice one, so I think I'm gonna do a lot of that. So you can see maybe the pigments in there are super fun. So I've got just a big old fat brush. You could use a sponge brush. You could use a cotton rag, you could use a paper towel until it starts to disintegrate. I could use a baby wipe. Keep in mind, the more wet the application tool, the more dilute your concentration. So if I just have a dry brush here, I have this most concentrated pigment. But if I, of course, now I have a whole different look here with just adding a little bit of water. Okay. Gonna add some black. The Taurus and the black together are probably my favorite right now because I'm really into this really rich navy color. So then now I put some separate, so I put the Taurus here a little bit, and then I went in the black, and then I didn't like how not blendy they were, so then I just went in and worked it with a little bit more water. It's much easier to take pigment away, no, add pigment on, then take it away. This is a stain, not a paint, so when I get ready to seal it, I fully expect to still be seeing the wood grain through it. Let's add some Blue Thunder over here, kind of mix it in with the purple. Could have done a whole sheet and then cut it after. I have this dark part of the graining here, so I think this is where I'm gonna choose some black. but I really like the blue and the purple and the black. But I might go in and splatter with some white acrylic paint after for some stars and give it that watery galaxy vibe. We'll see. Just gonna add some water down here, blue water. You can see that I am not rinsing my brush thoroughly. If I was trying to layer in some complementary colors, some reds or oranges or yellows, then I would need to definitely be rinsing my brush so that I was more in control of any of the mixing. Trying to get like a little galaxy thing going. So now that this is wet, I put down the pigment and it's gonna start to spread out a little bit. I'm just going to keep going here with the same method and speed this up a little bit so we can get back to business a little quicker. You can see I've got some places where my metallic pigments are drying in, I don't know, a pattern maybe I don't particularly like. So I'm just going to go ahead and layer in some of the blues to balance out some of the kind of red-brown pigments that were drying there. And we're just going to keep going. As I continue to paint here at warp speed, you can tell that I am just kind of tapping in the pigment to look kind of like a splotchy galaxy scene. I will take this time to continue to paint super fast and also point out that unicorn spit is a stain and not a paint. So I thoroughly expect to be able to see some of the beautiful wood grain once this is dry, and we're going to be sealing it. We're going to be using an oil-based sealant, which is recommended for all the unicorn spit gel stains because it is a water-based product and we don't want to rehydrate the pigments and smear them all around whatever surface we've decided to apply them to, which will happen. So if you go in and you try to seal something with unicorn spit with a water-based polyacrylic, it's just not going to work. Another great aspect about it is that because it's water-based, you can allow it to thoroughly dry. So I've got this little cup here that I used for a different project, and I just let it dry completely for a couple of days. But I know that I could just put some water in it and let it sit for a little while, and it would rehydrate great, and I could just use it again. So this stuff is expensive. It's really great to be able to save every drop of it and use it for whatever projects I want. just taking these final moments to go ahead and add some just this purple and just other colors around to just get kind of a cohesive spread of the colors everywhere on the canvas. And I'm really liking how this is turning out here. So just adding a little bit more purple and just giving it that multicolor effect. So another thing I might do, and I don't know if I'll like this, but I can fix it if I don't, is I'm going to add some water, and it's going to do its own thing at the middle of the drop. It will start to push the pigment out toward the edges. So we'll see if I like it. Probably doing too much. So it'll add its own little organic texture to it. All right, friends. Oh, I have to do my stars. Let's get a little piece of blue tape here and do the stars. Hands are wet. So I just have blue painter's tape, and then I'm tucking in the ends so that it sticks to my cardboard. And then I don't want the brush to move these around too much. So the tape will help. Just purple. Okay, so yeah, the water here has just added some little, it's drying here still, but it'll just kind of start adding some different texture to it, and hopefully I like it. All right, I'm gonna let this dry. If I was really feeling impatient, I would take a blow dryer to it. You do notice that water and wood don't always play nice. So it has kind of warped while it's wet. It has kind of warped here. And so I think as it dries, I might put something, once it's a little bit more dry, I might put something on it and let it dry a little bit more flat. Or I could seal it all up, let it dry, seal it all up, flip it over, spray the back with a mist bottle, and then put a couple more sheets of plywood on there, maybe some weights, and then weight it down after it's already dry if I don't want to mess up the pigment. Hey friends, back again. It's mostly dry, and while it's still a little cool to the touch, so there's still some water in probably the wood veneer and the MDF itself, so it'll get more time, but at least the pigment on the top is dry to the touch. And I was talking about like maybe splattering some white acrylic paint on it after, but then I remembered how much I love gold, and so I am going to go ahead and splatter some of this Zeus and then let that dry and then seal the whole thing. So it's just the 14 karat gold. It's a little bit on the orange side, but I'm okay with that. So I'm going to splatter a little bit. I just have a cheapy brush, and then I have to decide where I'm going to make my mess. So I might honestly, since the unicorn spit washes off, no, that has oil in it. I won't do that. I'm going to probably just make a little puddle and try not to make, maybe here, and try not to make too much of a mess. So I'm just gonna do a little. And the thing about splattering is that you do want it to be mixed with some water so that it splatters off your brush instead of glops off your brush, if that makes sense. So I'm going to use unclean water and then just kind of make a looser. And then I also need enough on my brush that the brush doesn't want to hold on to every single little bit. So it kind of has to be a little sopping without being drippy. So I'm gonna call that good enough. And maybe I'll do a little test. And then you just need something else hard to smack it on. So you could use 2 paintbrushes. You could use your hand if you wanted to. You could use another bottle of unicorn spit. I just have this, and so you can tell it's not fully. I'm gonna make it a little looser. And then I like to do the first kind of tap off my piece so that I kind of have an understanding of what the spray is gonna look like. Fan brushes are really great for this. This one is so old and cheap, it's falling apart in my hands. Okay, so I think this is gonna be fine. And maybe I'll do like, okay. The brush is legit falling apart. We'll see how that dries, and I might still go back in with some, it's a little subtle, and it's going to depend on the angle, which I kind of like. It's going to depend on the angle that you're walking by, but I still might go through with some white and maybe do some brush stars or something. But I will take this off so you guys can see a little bit better. And look at all that glittery pigment, and you can see where I added the water. It just kind of moved some of the pigment and the shimmer around, and that, like, it just won't be what it looks like. It will not reveal itself fully until it's sealed. But a galaxy is not perfect, and so neither will this be. So, all right, gonna let it dry again, and then let's try and seal it. Okay, I am dry enough here, and my little gold glitter is dry enough as well. So I'm going to give this a seal with my hemp oil salve. If you need a product that is going to get rid of the wood smell, or at least cover it up. I wish you could smell it through the video, but you can't. This is a really great one. Okay. I have my cotton rag here, and I'm just going to grab it. You can see it does have a slight green because of the botanical, but and it's a little shiny here. That's reflection. That is not actually what it looks like. So you can see I'm just rubbing it on. And it's not smearing much at all. It is removing a little bit of the pigment, but it's not smearing it around. I can see my brush strokes, all my little unicorn spit dots are present and accounted for and not smearing. I'll get to a part where it'll be out of the reflection zone. forgot to do that little sanding. Of course, I didn't do it on that spot here, but I am gonna just do, I don't wanna pick up too much of the pigment because you can see the sanding will, so very lightly. Just any spot that is a little rough. Kind of dusted down any of the probably if I wasn't recording this and trying to just show you guys, I don't know that I would have sanded it for my own personal use, but it's good practice. Okay, I think that's good. This spot here. I didn't actually smear much. Okay, back to this. Get this out of the way. It does have a nice sheen to it that softens as the oil soaks in. So for the sake of time and sanity, I'm going to go ahead and speed this up. I did want to note here that the unicorn spit and this hemp salve are some of my favorite products, also because they have 0 VOCs and they are non-toxic. So I could be working on this and be in my house. My kiddo could be playing right next to me, or maybe she comes up and touches it, and I don't have to worry. Also, I get the stuff on my hands, and this salve is great. I just rub it into my skin and I don't really worry too much about needing to get every little piece of it off my hands. So we're gonna finish up here in just a second, but as you can see, it's really bringing out a lot of the color and vibrance of the unicorn spit. All right, we're gonna let that soak on in. It should lighten up a little bit. I wanted it dark, but it should lighten up a little bit as the oil dries a bit. You know, it's all nice in my fingers. Feels good, smells good. Okay. So you can kind of see, especially like here, how we push the wood grain. We push the pigment into the wood grain. You can still see some of the striations from the maple, which I like. And the black did a great job right here covering the dark spots of the wood grain there that I didn't really like. So it did a great job really covering that up. All right, it's almost dry. Okay, friends, I gave it some more time. I am back again, and it is fully cured, or at least good enough for this application. So we're gonna get ready to glue the kind of acrylic blob, iridescent blob, to the back here. And so I'm just gonna check my fit. Such a pretty acrylic. I will say though that I did it here in this step, but if I had to do it over, I'd probably save it till the end. That way it would be much easier to keep this acrylic safe and clean, and I would be worried much less about it. But for this instance, I glued it on here and it worked just fine. So I'll be using the clear Gorilla Glue, and it does a pretty good job of not being too tacky and ugly looking when it's gluing transparent acrylic to wood, but you can definitely see the glue blobs through the acrylic. Thank goodness it's on the back, so I'm not too worried about it. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and trace my blob shape right around, and this way I will know the space that I need to be applying my glue, and I will reduce the amount of glue kind of showing through on the wood around the acrylic. So now I'm just going to go ahead and start adding a stream of glue right in the space between my pencil and the edge of the cut around the manta ray. Kind of pressing down with the tip to just make sure that I'm kind of flattening the bead of glue, and I will probably go around it and kind of smear it around before I add on the acrylic. Just another little touch here. And there we go. All right, now I'm just gonna take my finger here and go ahead and spread out so that there's kind of a nice even film of the glue on the wood. I just want to eliminate any opportunity for a big glob of glue to spread out and ooze onto the piece of the acrylic that is going to show through the little window of the manta ray. Okay, now that that is all smoothed out, I have my acrylic sheet, and I'm going to very carefully use those pencil lines to try and rest this down as much as I can without having to kind of push and smear the glue, because the more I'm jostling this around, the more I might move some glue into the section that we're going to be looking at. So I've got some books here, and I'm just going to stack them and allow this some appropriate drying time. Generally, it takes about an hour, and then it's fully cured in about 24. So this looks good, and we're going to give it some time. Okay, I did some other things. It's been about an hour, and I think that it's probably in place fine enough. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these books, give it a little nudge to make sure, and then yeah, this thing is not budging. So we're good to go. Let's give it a little flip. And you can see we've got that super fun iridescent acrylic just visible through the manta and the ring. Okay, friends, the next thing we need to do is start to glue on our stars. So I'm gonna go ahead and mess around with a couple of different placement ideas before I put glue down. Okay, I finally got an idea of where I want these to be, and I'm going to go ahead and again use the clear Gorilla Glue to fasten these to the acrylic. So I have my glue here, and I'm just going to ever so slightly add a little dot of glue to the back of each shape, and then I'm going to, same as before, kind of smear it on so I get more of a thin film rather than a blob. I want to make sure that there isn't any glue too close to the edge of each of the shapes, because I don't want any of it spilling over onto the acrylic. So very carefully doing my best to make sure it's straight. It isn't, and I'll just slightly nudge it so that it is lined up with the other stars, and then just repeat the process. Okay friends, we have the last little bit glued on here, and then I'm going to go ahead and give this glue just a little bit more time to dry so that we are not messing anything up. Okay, we are back, and you can see with a little bit different light, this is gorgeous. And I'm really excited to get into the LED strips next. So my husband really wanted to do the LED part, so my hands got a little bit more masculine during the break. But first, we got this Govee brand LED light strip, and they came with these great little clips that have adhesive back, or you can do a screw in, but we're just going to use the adhesive back and space these evenly around the sign. And then once we get good placement, we'll go ahead and just peel off that 3M sticker and put them down. Okay, now that everything is in the place that we like, kind of evenly spread around, we're gonna just go ahead and peel off this great 3M backing and go ahead and stick them on. Got that top one here, and repeat. Now we've done all of them except these final 2 or 3 because we really would like to see what the LED rope kind of looks like before we secure the ends. So I'm gonna go ahead and untwist. This was a super well made rope. We kind of sprung for the more expensive one here, this Govee brand, but we've been super impressed with the quality. And so we're just gonna kind of lay it around here and get a sense of where the wire kind of comes down in the middle. Once we had a place that we really liked, we went ahead and clipped on the bracket onto the rope light and then decided where the rest of them should be. So that looks really good, and we're gonna go ahead and peel off that backing to secure it in place. Once we had that last end bracket there, it was pretty easy to go ahead and add the remaining brackets. After that, we just kind of went around and fed the rope through all of the earlier brackets until we made it back to the other end. And then we decided where to put the rest of the brackets. Now we're also going to be putting standoffs at the top and bottom of the sign. So we were kind of thinking about what might leave enough room so that we could add the standoff. So it's going to end up being kind of right in between that D and E there at the bottom. So that leaves us plenty of room to get that little drill hole in there. Another thing we would have done differently, probably should have cut that out with the laser instead of using the drill, but that's okay, we learned something. And so getting the rest of these brackets taped down, and pretty quickly you are going to be able to see some version of the final product, which I have to tell you is super, super cool. All right, dim the lights. I'm just giving it a little flip here, and you can kind of get an idea. There we go. So lights are down, and again, you can see that that neon LED rope just lights up the whole back, and you get this really cool silhouette of the logo. And just like we had hoped, that iridescent acrylic really changes the look of the manta ray. Like seriously guys, how cool is this? All right, now we've moved to the garage, and do you remember when I told you that maybe I wished that we would have put this acrylic on after? So here's an example. So I also forgot to put the standoff holes at the top and bottom of the sign, which would have cut beautifully with the laser, but oh well. So we've got just a drill bit here that matches the size of our standoffs, roughly. Could have been a little bit bigger. We also put some blue painter's tape on the nice side of our sign to just kind of protect it from the chipping, and a little drilling into a little 2x4 here. So we've got one side, and now we're just going to flip it around, place it on the 2x4, and do our best to put it in the right spot. So giving it another little zhuzh here, trying to get a good hole there. And I have to tell you, there's that one little spot where we just blew a bunch of sawdust into the acrylic, so that was fun. So we're gonna have a little cleanup job to do here, both on the side of the sign and the acrylic, because it just didn't work out the way that we had hoped, but that's okay. We can fix it and it will still look great. So we're just gonna widen up these holes as best we can so that the standoffs screw pretty well through, and get this baby on the wall. Okay, I'm back at my table, and after that fun little adventure, we had a little damage to the sign. So we're gonna go ahead and buff down some of that chipped veneer and MDF with some sandpaper so that we can get some unicorn spit. And my husband's helping me here with the other side. So we're just gonna go ahead and sand off some of the chipped wood here before we get ready to add a little bit more unicorn spit. The one at the top actually is going to be covered, any of the damage is going to be covered by the standoff, so we're only worried about this bottom one. I have my unicorn spit, and I'm just going to very quickly add it around that chip. So I'm trying to match it as best as possible with a couple of different colors here, and I'm honestly just going to use my finger, because I don't mind stained fingers, to dab it into the cracks of the wood, and then give it a little time to dry and seal her up, just like what we did before. Okay, I think that is looking good enough, and I might not even worry too much about sealing it. It's a pretty small area, but that's what I would do. I would just let it dry and then go ahead and add that same sealant here. So you can see once we add the standoff, it's really not going to be any really much visible damage at all. All right, so we're moving on to our standoffs, and we've already marked on the wall where we would like to put them, and we put in the drywall mounts already. So we're just putting the screw through the standoff portion of the standoff and securing it into the drywall. We repeated the process for the top standoff, and now we're going to do our best to climb up on our table and get these on here. So we put the little screw kind of tops on the top and bottom of the sign, and basically your sign just gets sandwiched in between the screws and the posts that have already been adhered to the sign. It's always easier when you get a buddy to help you. So with two of us, we were able to get this up on the wall. I won't say effortlessly, but we did it. So after some more teamwork and having to redo the bottom drywall anchor, we were able to get both of these standoffs secured into the wall. All right, turning down the lights and getting ready. I think that we got it, and yep, it is a super fun application of a laser cut sign, some acrylic, and these cool LED light strips or ropes. We found that the light rope was much more flexible than the kind of tape-like strips, so this was a perfect application for it. And as you can see, as we cycle through so many of the different colors, that center manta ray in many of them just comes out as a fun, different color than the lettering. We're super pleased with it. And we can have a party now with our strobing manta ray. Here you go, friends. That was it. You have made this sign from start to finish with us, the mistakes and the successes along the way. If you're interested in how I might price this for wholesale and retail, stick around. All right, I'm back as promised to talk a little bit about pricing. So the first thing I did was tally up all of the costs of my hard supplies and materials. So from my plywood to the acrylic, paint, sealant, glue, sandpaper, as well as my standoff hardware and my most expensive item, the Govee LED rope lights, which I did purchase at a retail cost. So if I were to be making many of these, I would definitely investigate how to source those at a wholesale price. Next, I moved over to my time. So the time that it took me to record this tutorial definitely slowed me down. So I really had to think about my skills and how quick I normally am when I'm just producing things and not thinking about lights, camera, or action. So I estimated my time, both in my design time, my machine time, finishing time, and assembly time, and came up with some pretty solid numbers. So my total cost of my supplies was $81. My hands-on time was about 65 minutes, and I'm charging $60 an hour. Next, my machine time earns $30 an hour. So that makes my total materials and labor costs $161. But that does not include my retail markup. So I did quite a bit of research, and what I know for sure is that there's often a very large spread in what is acceptable for a retail price. And it's going to depend on your area, your competition, cost of all kinds of things. So generally what I'm seeing is that your retail markup is going to be 2 to 3 times your manufacturing costs, and that includes your labor. So I'm not doing 2 to 3 times just my supply cost of $81. I'm doing 2 to 3 times my total manufacturing costs of $161. So you could end up with a retail price anywhere from $322 to $483, leaving my retail profit above what I'm earning as a, let's say, wage to produce the sign of $161 to $322. It's really going to depend on some other variables and some market research. All right, friends, that's it. Thanks so much for joining me. If you enjoyed this video, like, follow, or share. And if you're not in my Facebook community, Laser Designs by Misa community, I would love to have you. Happy making.